Hi, my name is T.M.Hoy, and welcome to 10 Things That Prove Religion is Made by Humans, Not a God or a Goddess. Religions are a belief system, and they're idea structures that are built from dreams. The dreams that create religion vary from otherworldly visions of mystics and prophets to the transcendent ones of a group wishing for a better world or sharing hallucinogenic trances. But whether utopian, apocalyptic, or visionary, the systems are the products of our subconscious minds. Religions are made of our hopes, fears, and desires, and proof of their human origin is obvious and easy to find. The clearest and most compelling evidence of human origin of religion is the way religions constantly evolve. Divine or supernatural creation should, in theory, be perfect and need no change, but religious beliefs are forever changing, and I've given 10 examples. As you can see on your screen now, this is a picture of an ancient Egyptian human sacrifice taken from a First Dynasty tomb. Things have changed a lot since then. Human sacrifice is no longer widely practiced. And this is my first point. Religions have changed in response to developments in technology and culture. When you look back, through ancient history, what you see is that religions change in lockstep with human societies themselves. And our species has existed about 200,000 years, hominids, Homo sapiens sapiens. And over that entire span of time, up until about 40,000 years ago, there's no evidence whatsoever that human beings had any kind of religion at all. It's not until the last ice age, about 40,000 years ago, that you have the very first evidence that there's some kind of religious belief in an afterlife, and that is where you have grave offerings. The first burials occur at that time, and you also find female figurines buried with these graves, as well as cave paintings and art. So the very first human cultures had begun to evolve about 40,000 years ago with grave offerings. And you also find there the first human sacrifices and animal sacrifices, which are human and animal bones that have been carved or gnawed on in some way. And at that point, you also have the very first human religions emerge. The second proof that religion is man-made, again, is these continual evolutions of religion, these continual changes in response to human technology and culture. The next huge change in religion comes with the domestication of animals and agriculture. And I have here a statue that shows a woman holding a lamb, which is kind of emblematic of that whole process of taming animals. And with the taming of animals, you begin the entire process of what we really consider as a true society, which is the idea of class, the idea of you have specialization of labor now. You have different groups of people because with animals and herds of animals, you have a food surplus, you have property, and all of that has profound implications for society. It changes society in very dramatic ways. So religion changed in response to that as well. And with religion, you begin to see gods and goddesses, where previously there were just spirits, none particularly more important than the other. Maybe the moon and the sun were important, a hunt and a mother goddess. But basically, they were all spirits. And the evolution to now you have gods and goddesses that are specifically interested in human activity. And this is a radical change. And that's, again, you can see that human beings have created religion. This isn't some perfect divine gift. Religions change as human beings change. The next radical shift came along with the invention of money. And you can see on your screen right now a picture of some very ancient coinage. The coins on the bottom are staters, and they are from Lydia, which was the first place to mint coins, about 640 BCE. Next to it are Aeginetan staters, and they were also a city-state right next door that was minting coins. And this is electrum, which is a natural combination of gold and silver that you find washing up on the shores of the Black Sea, which is where the first coins were minted. Above you see ancient Chinese coins, and these date from about 600 BC through about 14 AD, or CE, Common Era. What you find with religion and the invention of money is a philosophical crisis that occurs because of what you might call the commoditization of nature. And this is the idea that nature is a commodity. And it's a radical shift from very ancient patterns. What you find in the ancient world is that everybody considers nature a sacred being with whom we have a relationship. And this changed hugely because with commoditization of nature and money, what you find is that you're basically saying that nature has no value except the ones that human beings give it. And this radical change occurred starting about 600 BCE and occurs, all the way through the next several centuries, all the way actually through another millennia. And when you look at the people that the prophets or the mystics that created the first monotheistic religions, they all occur on that trade path, that trade route that led from Greece in the west all the way to China in the east. The only exception was Egypt, and that's a separate category of a ruler trying to fight a priestly elite there. But basically, in the far west you have Greece, which is rationality, and that's our intellectual forebears. And those people believed that you didn't need gods. Gods were irrelevant. And so that was their response to the commoditization of nature. The next culture were the Persians. And they said, and I'll give a timeline for this in a second. And the Persians, their response was to reject the world, to say, you know what, the world is evil. Good and evil kind of rise above the worldly realm. And that response to it led to dualism. And while the Jews were in Babylon during this time period, which is Cyrus the Great, he freed them about 580 BCE. At that time period, you have Zoroaster and the first kind of monotheistic approach to religion, which is dualism. And the Jews got the dualism from their period there in Babylon and brought it back with them. And their descendants, Christianity and Islam, borrow heavily from that, Judaism and from Zoroastrian dualism. That's where that came from. Previous to that, the Jews were just like all the neighbors. The Hebrews were just like all the neighbors, which was, polytheistic belief systems. The next culture along was India, and there you have the emergence of Buddhism, again a monotheistic faith that posits one, a great idea rather than a multitude of deities. And you also have Jainism, which is another monotheistic approach to Hinduism. Further east again in China, you have Taoism, which is an opposite reaction, but still very, very monotheistic. It's the idea of the Tao, the single way, the flow, that you flow with nature. There's no longer a bunch of deities running around. It's just one idea. And Confucianism, which is the idea of hierarchy and control. So when you look at a timeline of all of these different people it was in a very tiny little narrow range of time. You have Pythagoras, for example, kind of an archetype of the Greek rationality, and he was born on Samos in 580 BCE. Then you have Zoroaster, whose life is given as 620 to 583 BC. You have Gautama, which is the Buddha, and his life is given as 560 to 483 BCE. You have Vardhamana, who is the prophet of the Jains, and he lived from 599 to 527. These are all dates, of course, that are assigned by tradition. They're not something written in stone. And then you have Lao Tzu, which is the founder of Taoism, and he was believed to have lived from 604 to 514 BCE. And Confucius, which is Confucius, and he lived from 551 to 478. So when you look at this timeline, you can see that within a tiny little span, the lifetime of all of these prophets, that you have a radical transition in religion, and I believe that it's in response to the invention of money, the crisis that money brings with the commoditization of nature. Now, the next proof or evidence is the final historical one that I'm going to present, and that is that religions were transformed by the triumph of science. What you find with the scientific method and empiricism, and I have a little picture here of an Asian scientist holding up a test tube, kind of a classic example of proof or evidence. What you find with religion now is that it has evolved to where it has to provide some kind of proof for believers to continue to believe in it. And that in religion has taken the form of mysticism, or a kind of experiential approach to religion, where people need spirituality. They're no longer satisfied with ritual. They're no longer satisfied with just phrases and belief. You know, you're forced to be faithful, to have faith. That's no longer acceptable. And you have the rise of things like the Pentecostals and the Charismatics in the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, where you have a direct experiential connection with God. You have a spiritual or a mystical experience. And you find that across the board throughout different kinds of religions all around the world. The scientific method has basically dominated human consciousness, and in response, religion has been forced to change. The next proof, the fifth proof, is the idea that there is no universal definition of good and evil. I have here a little picture that you're looking on your screen of see no evil, hear no evil. Those statues is kind of a classic example of that. What you find with the definition of good and evil is that they vary hugely from culture to culture. For example, with the Eskimos, the idea was that you know, they're right on the edge of survival. They're barely able to survive, and consequently, they need every spare bit of food, or they did up until very recent times. So Inuit ethics, or Eskimo ethics, said the ideal thing to do is that if you're elderly and you can no longer provide for the group, you can't help the tribe, then you don't waste the tribe's resources. You go out on the ice and you die out there. You get eaten by a polar bear, you die of exposure, whatever. And that was the proper response. So suicide by the elderly was considered the proper response of somebody to do that. And we're horrified in the West. It's like, what? Suicide? That's the ethical thing to do? It's like, absolutely. When food supplies are in short supply, that's what you do. Another example would be the idea of impure animals or impure groups. The Hindus see an entire race of people as untouchables, and these are people that are spiritually impure. The caste system itself, which is very widespread, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people still follow this spiritually, and that's the idea that you have different literal grades of people that are, some are more spiritually advanced or purer than others. The same thing with animals. There's plenty of animals that one group finds sacred and another finds horrible. The Muslims revile pigs, but the Hindus have no problem eating pigs. They have the cow as sacred. And because they live side by side and they eat each other's sacred animals, well, you've got a lot of violence. So there is no universal definition of good and evil. It's just pretty much arbitrary from culture to culture, and that's another proof that religion is completely based on human ideas and human concepts. Sixth proof is that mythologies themselves differ radically, and I have here a little picture that you're seeing of a nymph and a satyr playing in a grotto. The mythology from culture to culture differs so radically that they're not even comparable. Joseph Campbell, the famous mythographer, pointed this out constantly, that mythology is purely a product of the culture in which they arise. And these stories differ radically. You've got groups that live in the tropics and they've got their mythologies. You've got groups that live in temperate climates and they have their kinds of mythologies. And all of them have been influenced by everything, history, geography, and so on. And so there is no unifying story except that human beings have a particular archetype that they follow. And that's another proof, actually, that religions are man-made. But we'll get into that in a section in a moment. So the next proof that religions are man-made is that the religious definition of reality changes radically. Religious explanations of how the universe works, they vary across a spectrum from religions like animism, where the belief is that everything is spiritual, everything is controlled by religion or magic, to the opposite end, religions like Scientology, where theoretically anyway, the universe is ruled by inflexible scientific laws, which is very close to the scientific belief system itself. And the essence of that is just that there is no magic, there is no religious role in spiritual life. So along this spectrum, you have all the different religions fall, and it's a really radical difference in the idea of what is reality and what governs reality. How does reality work? And the way that religions explain this, of course, obviously, there's no divine or perfect model. There's thousands of religions, and all of them have their own definition of how reality works. The next proof is the idea of an afterlife or a utopia. By very definition, the idea that there is a perfect place that exists beyond life, it simply can't work, because every culture has their own idea about what's perfect. What's perfect to somebody from the United States or Japan would be abhorrent to someone from an animist society that lives out in the jungle, for example. They wouldn't even begin to relate. So the idea that there's one perfect afterlife created by a supernatural being, you can see when you're looking at all the different varieties of afterlives that religions describe, that this is something that, of course, is absurd, that there's no way that you could have one perfect place that we all go to. Finally, well, this is not quite, but number 9, religions are all based on human archetypes. And I have here a picture of the Apsaras, which are the Apsaras, which are some Hindu goddesses, or Hindu angels, really. You find with religions that it always goes back to that same archetype, which is the idea that everything is based around a human family. Now, the idea that you have this creator, and I mean, if you believe in an omnipotent God, of course, and that he's going to follow one creation out of tens of millions of species on the planet, and that he's going to follow every little quirk and every little habit of one of his creations, and that is going to be the truth for all beings. Come on. It's a grotesque conceit of religions, that human beings are so important and human beings are so vital just because we're conscious. But we're not the only beings that are conscious on the planet. Whales and dolphins certainly have very complex cultures, which we've learned in the last dozen years. And as well, the great apes are a lot closer, and so are chimpanzees. They're a lot closer than we'd like to believe in terms of their consciousness. So those are just a few examples. There's many different varieties of consciousnesses, and the idea that the Creator would choose our consciousness to be the supreme one, and that all religions, which are based on the family archetype, human norms, this is a proof that religions are purely products of human societies. Finally, religions themselves are all focused on catering to human needs. And you can see here a picture of a mother and child. This is really the ultimate proof that religions are human-made, because a true religion, which is essentially something that should reach out for every creature and everything, religions are completely consumed with providing hope and faith and comfort and meaning for believers. And if they don't satisfy their believers, that religion wouldn't exist a week. I'm sorry. It has to focus and help the people that believe in that faith. And of course, mainly that means creating meaning for those people and giving them an opportunity to create a legacy for themselves so they're not forgotten, as well as hope, which is a crucial part. So this is the essence of the 10 things that prove that religion is made by humans. That last one, that religions devote themselves completely to serving human desires. And, this is completely at odds with the concept of what is divine or supernatural, because these are beings that by definition are beyond human care and concern. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll visit my website, thenatureofreligion.info, and you can see that there at the bottom right of the screen. And thank you very much for joining me. You have a good day.